You're listening to the Cinemental Podcast.
Shall we begin?
Welcome back to the Cinemental Podcast, where we discuss mental health themes from cinema, television, and popular culture. I'm Jeffrey Jones, and I'm a filmmaker and professor, and I'm joined, as always, by my brother, Dr. Joshua Jones, who, along with writing his own ER drama set in a small town called Forks, Washington, the show is called The Fork, he is a general and forensic psychiatrist. Josh, Twilight was made in Forks, Washington, for those who might not know. So Forks, Washington, which is very close to where my brother lives, was a pretty famous town.
You're almost right. It was set in Forks, Washington. There wasn't actually a single bit of it that was filmed in Forks, Washington.
I thought they shot a bunch of it up there.
No, they shot the exterior high school scenes in Kalama, Washington.
Did they?
They did, but not in Forks, Washington. And the author, Stephanie Meyer, had never set foot in Forks. I could be wrong on that. I think that's not true. She's been there now. She goes actually pretty frequently for Twilight days out there in good old Forks, Washington. But so let's get into it, because this is actually the first time that we've done a second season of a show.
Yeah, second season. We haven't done a sequel yet. So yeah, we love the Pitt so much, and there's a new, fresh group of mental health issues to talk about.
Right.
Which is why we're doing the second season. Before we get into that, we want you to start your week off right with our podcast. So we drop a new episode every Monday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts, or you can watch our hottest and spiciest clips and full episodes on YouTube. Josh, as you said, we're covering the Pitt season 2, and this one centers more heavily on Robby, as he's pushed to his limits, balancing the relentless pressure of the ER with the unraveling of his personal life. As his decisions grow riskier and more emotionally charged, Robby becomes a reflection of the show's core tension: how far someone can go in saving others before they lose themselves. Josh, talk about the topics we're gonna go through today.
Well, Jeff, first we're going to talk about whether or not season 2 lived up to season 1. And I know you've got lots of thoughts about that and why it's a very difficult thing to do in general. Yeah. From a mental health standpoint and healthcare standpoint, we're going to talk about artificial intelligence and healthcare. There was a plot line that weaved through a couple episodes
with Alashimi,
that I think is important to talk about. We're going to talk about whether AI in healthcare is a friend or a foe, or whether that's the wrong question to ask entirely.
Oh, interesting. I love that.
Yeah,
I can't wait to get into that. Yep.
We're going to continue to talk about a topic that we touched on in the first season of The Pitt, and that is the medium speed collapse of the healthcare system, and especially around its fragile infrastructure and the burnout of the people that it relies on so heavily. And then finally, Jeff, we're going to talk, and I can't believe I'm saying these words, we're going to talk about unaliving ideation. And you're going to tell us why I have to say that on this podcast. It is not in any way humorous. It is not in any way trying to downgrade what we're going to talk about, but we have to say that for particular reasons. Jeff?
Yeah, we're going to talk about the big S. This season featured a lot of characters dealing with that particular mental health issue. The reason we have to use the term unaliving instead of the big S is all of the platforms flag and do transcriptions of podcasts, and those words will often mean that episodes won't get pushed. So this is too important to not talk about, so we're going to talk about it in the way that gives it the best chance. Because this season, as someone who has had a mental health breakdown, this season was amazing in terms of its accuracy, I felt, about at least what I went through with, when I had a mental health breakdown. And we'll debate whether Noah Wiley's character truly got to, being quote unquote the big S, or, how serious he was about possibly unaliving himself. But that's the point, is that there's a massive kind of runway and massive spectrum of depression leading to, ultimately, an ultimate act.
Well, right. And that's what I really want to talk about today and use the platform later in the episode is what are the different stages, phases, severities of ideation around the big S. Take away some of that mystery, because again, if we can take away the mystery, take away the stigma, then we can talk more about it. There will be fewer big S's, and there will just be less overall suffering. So I'm so glad that they used this season to really discuss that. I'm also glad that they didn't just do a one-off. There's a couple. There's Robby that is experiencing it. They had another character, a mother, experiencing it as well. Big, heavy issues. I'm so glad we get an opportunity to talk about them.
Yeah, no, agreed. Must-watch TV in terms of I felt like the accuracy of lead up, how friends should handle other friends who they believe, might be on that path. I give a massive amount of credit to the season 2 of Pitt for covering that as well as they did. That is unfortunately one of the only things I'm going to give them credit for in covering, and we will talk about that. And I guess we could just launch into, Josh, did season 2 live up to season 1? I didn't think that it did. I felt that it fell flat in a couple of places. They didn't do a great job of finishing storylines, and I'm actually going to talk about that a little bit later. But this is a common thing that happens, Josh. And you agree that season 2, this isn't just me, you agree that season 2 didn't live up to season 1, correct?
I agree that season 2 didn't live up to season 1. I'm having a hard time determining whether it was a really good season or not. Partially because of the comparison factor. Season 1 was groundbreaking.
Yeah.
In an era in which it's hard to say television's groundbreaking.
Yeah, totally. And this was more of the same, but I did feel like there was a drop off in quality. And if you want to say that the season 1 was a 10 out of 10, season 2 was probably still a 9 out of 10, or
that's what I'm thinking.
8 out of 10. Yeah, it was still incredible. But it's kind of like when The West Wing fell off. I loved it so much that when it had a slight drop in quality, I noticed it. So I'm in no way critiquing the Pitt in an awful way, but this sort of thing happens a lot. And there's 3 main reasons why, Josh, shows tend to fall off in the second season. And I'll go through some of those now.
Yeah.
Number 1 is the development process for a show is pretty long.
Okay.
And the second season usually comes pretty quickly. And so when you're developing a show, sometimes it can take years, and you pour your heart and your soul into it. And so you have time to really develop your storylines. And then it's a hit, and you're asked to very quickly, pump out a second season. And it's that, sort of misunderstanding by producers of what it takes to make great art. And it takes time to make great art. This is why the second season of True Detective fell off so hard. It often happens that the quick comeback will lead to, a product not being as great.
Well, let me ask you a couple questions about that, Jeff. So it comes quickly. I guess what you're saying is, if we think about a season as being like a year later, the development at least is much quicker than the years, the indeterminate amount of time that it may have taken them to get it made in the first place. That next year happens, it's much faster, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Second question on that: what about in the era of streaming now, when we're not necessarily beholden to the calendar, the network production calendar of the fall launch of the season and things like that? Are television productions still pretty much sticking to that production schedule, or has that loosened up some?
No, and it's funny. You'll see fans of shows be like, "Oh, why did it take them 3 years to make a season 2? But man, season 2 was good." It's like, well, did you want it fast or did you want it great? People think that writers sit down and everything Quentin Tarantino writes, as soon as his fingers hit the keyboard, it's gold. No, there's a process. There's a process for everybody. You dig deeper and you dig deeper and you dig deeper, and you gotta dig that hole. And if you don't have time to dig a deeper hole, then you're not going to get as good a writing. It's like anything; it takes time. Okay, so reason number 2, this one's pretty obvious, and it's the same reason why it's hard to win back-to-back Super Bowls in football, Josh. Your best talent gets sniped.
Oh.
So oftentimes, someone who's like the co-producer, is the kind of the second in command, will get sniped to show run their own show. And so you have your better writers, not necessarily your showrunner, but showrunners do change. But you'll have your second, third best writers getting sniped for other shows. And so, you have more junior writers who are still kind of trying to write, in the style of the main guy, but not necessarily pushing the storylines the way that the better writers were. And not all writers are equals. In any room, you have really great writers and, not as good at writers or just not as experienced at writers. But yeah, a lot of times talent gets sniped. And then number 3, this one's tough. It's the overconfidence of showrunners, where when you have a hit, you think, I'm a hit maker. Everything I do is gold. And so they don't put in the work that they put in originally, where they really pump their heart and their soul. They think, when my fingers hit the keyboard, I pump out gold. And so, and you'll see this with films as well, where someone's like second, third film, will often tank at the box office because they get overconfident and think that anything that they do, people are going to love. Writers are not celebrities the same way that movie stars are. We don't just sign up to see their face. We come to the movie to see how brilliant your writing was. And if you don't put in the time, if you don't put in the work, then we're not going to be impressed. So those are the main 3 reasons why shows tend to fall off.
Now, we don't know that that's what happened with the Pitt at all. And like you said...
Well, it was a fast comeback.
It was a fast comeback. Okay.
Yeah. They definitely had a fast comeback. I didn't look into whether, writers got sniped or whatnot. Josh, that was some fun filmmaking banter, but let's really get into what I think was the strongest part of this season, and it was the big S ideation of Noah Wyle.
Yeah.
Talk me through, because what I thought was really interesting was noticing early some of the signs that he might be thinking about the big S. Can you walk me through what those signs are and walk our audience through what those signs are so that we can, look for them in our friends and loved ones?
Yeah. For Robby, for Noah Wyle's character, the general and pervasive lack of caring about his personal safety was a big key right off the bat, and the lack of caring kind of about his own personal health. I pointed this out, I think, when you and I watched the first episode. He's not wearing a helmet on his motorcycle. That is ridiculous. Come on, Doc, do better. What I didn't realize at that point was that was setting up his frame of mind for the entire series, that he was crossing the barrier, crossing the boundary from caring about his existential being and not caring about what happens to him.
Right.
And that is often the first step for somebody who is, really losing hope. Look, I'm going to talk here about some steps or some phases or some severities of the big S ideation, but I don't want anybody to think that this is necessarily a linear progression or that people have to go through these stages if they start to, think about the big S or even end up completing it. It can jump faster, but this happens very frequently, especially in somebody who is experiencing trauma and depressive symptoms that Robby obviously is throughout this season.
Yeah. And it's funny, the helmet thing, because this is one of the reasons why I think the big S is so important to talk about. Is this is early on, possibly in his depression, and I think that this probably happens pretty frequently where people are doing things that are dangerous, and even though they might not be even close in their own mind to the big S, they're doing behaviors that could lead to their death, and putting yourself in a position to be more accident prone. You don't have to. It's taking the onus off you to do the big S. Then is the time to intervene. When you notice a friend is doing things that are more risky, it's already time to intervene with your friend and say, what is going on? talk me through this decision. Might there be some other things going on? Can we get you some help? It's that early, people. And early intervention is what I'm going to preach over and over as we talk about this.
Yeah, that's right. Identifying the early signs is what I really want to get to today. Starting from the most visible point on the gradation of the big S ideation, we often see media portrayals focus on the critical or the emergency severity level,
Sure.
where plan about how to do the big S and intent to do it collide into immediate action. We see this vividly in this season with the mother who was overwhelmed by the devastating news that her son's heat stroke has likely led to permanent brain damage, attempts to walk into oncoming traffic. She's grabbed by Dr. Al-Hashimi, of course, and saved, and then given some psychiatric help. But in this state, the ambivalence between life and death has vanished, and the pain is so acute that the person's in a state of cognitive constriction, seeing only one possible exit. And an intervention in that stage, by the way, is purely about physical safety. It's an
cognitive
immediate
constriction. Talk to me, but define that for me.
The narrowing of your view so you can see only one or very limited options going forward. So right now, Jeff, where you're sitting there, you have a million options of what you could do right in this second. You could tell me to fuck off. You could stand up. You could walk over that way. But in cognitive constriction, all that narrows until you can only see one path forward. And in somebody with very severe depression or trauma, like that woman, that cognitive constriction has come down to the point where the only option is death.
Is there any other times people experience cognitive constriction?
Lots of times. It's not just around when somebody is considering the big S, but we see that a lot of times in stress. We've talked lots on this show, and we will continue to talk lots on this show about the stress response, fight, flight, or freeze.
Sure.
Oftentimes, cognitive constriction happens in those moments of stress.
That makes total sense.
Where your mind has come down to just one or a couple of options, and that's all you can think about in that moment.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Thank you for taking the time on that.
Yeah. So if we step a little bit back from that severity, we find the person who has an active plan for the big S, but perhaps lacks the immediate intent or the means to act right now.
Okay.
This is the pre-crisis stage where someone might have research methods or set aside medication just in case. Intervention here is a race against time to dismantle that plan.
Right.
And this can be done both by lay people, by friends and loved ones, in concert with professionals as well. It involves lethal means counseling, so removing the tools of self-harm from the home, if it's a gun, if it's pills, and building a robust crisis response plan, or CRP. In this stage, in a clinical setting, this is where we move from monthly check-ins to daily or weekly support from a mental health professional or crisis counselor, surrounding the individual with a circle of care to ensure that they're not left alone while they navigate this distress.
But Robby's in the pre-crisis stage, right?
He's getting there, and this is where we want to back up.
You don't think the him going on that was a plan?
He's not quite there, because it's not a plan. It's more of an ideation.
Okay.
And this is where I would say Robby is. And this is the most nuanced and often overlooked part of this gradation. This is passive ideation, and it is exemplified by his arc during this season.
Give me an example of what that could have looked like when it comes to Robby. Like if he would have had another step in his plan, where would you have been aha, that's crossing into it?
Yeah. So his plan, his stated idea of what the sabbatical or vacation was, that he was just going to ride.
Right.
His friends, including Nurse Dana, including the other attending, they feared that he actually had a plan to go and drive his motorcycle off the cliff.
Right.
He had never expressed that, but they knew him well enough to fear that that was the plan.
And so if he'd have said that would have crossed the line for you into the means, the methods, etc.
Absolutely. Now, I think it's very likely in this universe, he's had those thoughts flip in and out. Like I said, this is not just a straight line from one point to the next point to the next point. And where Robby is for most of the season 2 is in this passive ideation.
Okay.
When he says in the second to last episode, I don't know if I want to be here anymore. He isn't necessarily standing on a ledge or clutching a bottle of pills or a gun, but he is expressing a profound sense of existential weariness. Mm-hmm. Passive ideation, like Robby had, is a desire for the world to stop, for the pain to end, and for him to simply cease to be without a specific plan to make it happen.
Yeah, and feeling like you can literally ride away from it and escape it. Because we think about like escapism as like, oh, I'm going to watch, just a television show and escape for a little while. No, he's trying to literally escape existing by riding away. And his buddy says like, you can't do that. There's no such thing.
And his buddy Duke does exactly what you should do in this situation.
Oh, Duke was my favorite.
Addressing passive suicide, addressing passive ideation like this is not about policing for safety, but it's about validation.
Yeah.
What
tell me about that. How does he validate him? I missed that.
He gets it. Duke understands what Robby is trying to do. He's trying to run from things. He says, you're not riding, you're running.
Right.
He's validating that he wants to get away from this. He says over and over again, this place looks like it could eat you alive. Yeah. He is doing exactly what needs to be done in that situation. It's not an emergency. You don't have to run out and sound the alarm bells. But you do have to acknowledge to the person that you see them, you hear them, and now it's time to work together to make a plan for a way out of this.
Yeah, you mentioned this early, Josh, and I want to get back to it just for a second. How does a friend help somebody build a crisis response plan? Is that something a friend should do? What does that look like?
They certainly can be a part of it. A crisis response plan or a crisis safety plan is best done with the person and a mental health professional. Oftentimes can be done with the folks who are on the other end of the 988 line. That is the crisis response line that is available in all the states, and they can help somebody build a crisis safety plan. What a crisis safety plan looks like, it's a written physical document, and that ends up being very important, that has activities or things that a person can do that's individualized to them when they're in a crisis, when they're starting to have thoughts about the big S. Yeah. For some people, it might be, I like to listen to music. For others, it might be, I like to go for a walk. For others, it might be, I want to just sweat the hell out of this.
Right. Gonna go to the gun range. Gonna take a knot tying class. Those are probably not. Those are not good ones.
I know you're saying it humorously, but I have had experiences where that was absolutely the thing that helped people when they felt stressed. Oh, wow. And this is really important when you're doing a crisis safety plan to involve friends and family if the person will let you. Yeah. Look, guns are a huge part of our world in America. Sure. They just are. And one of the things that we talk about with lethal means restriction, or removing the things that one can kill with, guns is a big thing. I talk with old men about, their guns. And old men, by the way, are at really high risk for the big S. And they're not ever going to give up their guns. Okay, I don't want the government to take them, but I want you to find your buddy who's been through the same thing and say, hey, when I'm like this, hold my guns for a bit. Okay. Yeah. well, let's go out shooting. Okay, if you're in a good space to do that, let's do that. That is a perfectly acceptable part of a crisis safety plan.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Thank you for taking a step back to talk about that.
Yeah, and yeah, absolutely. Look, Jeff, this is so nuanced, but the important thing is if you identify this in a loved one, in a friend, open up the conversation, talk about it. You know, it is okay. It is okay to say to somebody, "Hey, man, I'm really concerned about you. Are you having any thoughts of hurting yourself or wanting to die?"
Yeah. It is okay. And that's
is
the
okay.
thing that's the thing that's so hard for people to like, "Oh, I don't want to make him feel uncomfortable if he's not feeling that way." Dude, it's a friend, make him feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid. I'm
buddy.
going to put this. I'm going to try and find it and include it in the episode or link to it. But there was this incredible ad that I saw. I can't remember who put it out, but it was obviously some sort of big S prevention, and it was two guys sitting watching a sporting event. And one of the guys just looked super depressed, and the other guy, looked like super happy. And they show them at a bunch of different games, and it's a time lapse, and there's a bunch of different games. And the one guy's always looking sad. And then all of a sudden, the guy that's happy is gone. And the guy that was happy was the one who committed the big S.
Oh.
And the thing was like, check in with everybody.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like you might think it will look like. And that to me is so important. It's just like, check in with your friends. Just see how they're doing. Even if you think they're doing great, there's just nothing wrong with being that guy that's like, hey, let's be real for a second about how things are going. You seem tired a lot. Talk to me about that. Be that person who is clearly a safe place to talk about. And they do that in season 2 with the Sean Hattasey character, and Robby. Because if you remember in season 1, we sort of thought that Hattasey was going to jump off the building.
Yeah. Right.
And so we already know that Robby had sort of been a sounding board for some thoughts that Hattasey had, where now he's going on these like super dangerous, getting shot at, taking bullets during the day, sort of lifestyle. And he's like, dude, that's how I'm coping with mine. Like you got to cope with yours, but like you were there for me, I'm going to be there for you. But I also was like, Sean, you're not being there enough. When I was watching, I was like, be there for Robby more. He's really struggling. Come on, man, sack up. But even he's like, I don't know. I don't really want to talk to him about it. And he's a doctor. He's a doctor who had those feelings. It is hard, but it is important.
Yeah, it's super important. And 2 myths, Jeff, that I just want to bust based on our conversation in the last few minutes.
Yeah.
One, if you ask somebody about the big S, you are not putting the ideas in their head.
Sure.
If you're sensing that it's something you should ask about, they've probably already thought about it.
Sure.
So you're not suggesting it to them. And 2 is that all signs in everybody look the same, and they don't. I remember growing up with the after-school specials, and it was, if somebody's giving all their possessions away, then they're thinking about the big S. That's one sign. It might happen for some people, but it is not universal.
Right.
And the biggest thing is changes in behavior that make you worry about them. That's the biggest universal sign.
Right. Changes in behavior is the universal sign, which, and Robby does. He essentially gives away his house, to the, I can't remember his name, but sort of the hick character. He's like, you can live there while I'm gone, and maybe I won't even come back. Which that's when I cued into like, oh, wow, so this is going to be about the big S. This season's going to be about the big S. It's sad. But yeah, great job, Pitt, season 2 of covering it. I thought it was really done brilliantly.
This was masterfully done. Really portraying Robby's ambivalence as he's internally wrestling with this passive ideation was just super good. It was well done, and I applaud them for it. Jeff, can't move past this segment without again saying that the 988 crisis line that you can call or text is a resource that everybody should know about. One thing that, Every year, about between 3 and 5% of American adults have some big S ideation. Not people who complete it, but have ideation, and about 15 to 18% of all American adults have thought about it at some point in their life. Those numbers are pre-pandemic. We're pretty sure that those numbers are a lot higher since it was last authoritatively studied.
Yeah, I don't doubt that at all.
Great, yeah.
All right, Josh, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but let's talk about AI, because it was sort of a plot line, but it just immediately got lost. And then Alashimi's plot line became about her brain condition. But she was very much a proponent of using AI to help with some sort of part of patient care. Talk me through that, and then let's talk about, what your feelings are, what the lay of the land is with AI and medicine.
Yeah, so in the show, she was using an app on her phone in which the phone and then the AI program is listening to the conversation that you're having with the patient. That is then transcribed into a note. Probably everybody knows this, but anytime you talk to a healthcare professional, a nurse, a doctor, anything like that, we create a note that goes into your electronic health record that is a record of, what was said in that conversation. It has been very time consuming. Has eaten up a lot of effort to try to document that correctly and accurately as time has gone on. AI tools are meant to help this, and that's what they showed. But they're just tools. And in the episode that it was featured in, there was an error that was made, and these can be made with AI. They can also be made without AI too.
Sure.
And errors are something that we strive to get out of medicine because they can have very grave consequences. Fortunately, most medical errors don't have any consequences, but we still want to get rid of them as much as possible. Look, your doctors are using AI. And if they're not in some way in your care, they should be. Here's why. AI tools such as asking a question of a program called Open Evidence that searches the Journal of American Medical Association and the New England Journal and a lot of other peer-reviewed journals for questions that used to take us hours to research is best practice now. Using AI tools to help transcribe or to help go through the volumes and volumes of notes that have accumulated in your electronic health record is best practice now. It cuts down on the time it takes to provide you with accurate care. So ask questions about it, but AI is here. It's here to stay. What I am coming to the realization about is that AI is not going to get you doctors and nurses and nurse practitioners listening. It's not going to get you home faster. It is going to remove. It is going to remove or make faster some of the grunt work, some of the scut work, so that you can do the really valuable parts of taking care of patients. But there are way more patients to take care of than we can ever take care of right now.
What are you worried about with AI?
What I'm concerned about in AI in healthcare is actually what I'm concerned about in AI in general usage, is that we don't really have transparency into what the companies who give these things away for free are doing with the data that they're collecting. Now, look, your physicians and your clinicians should not be putting your health information into an off the shelf AI tool. If they're doing that at all, it has to be one that is specifically designed for healthcare and that has firewalls in which your personal health information is protected.
Sure.
But that's my big concern, is I don't know what they're doing with this information. The other big concern that I have for AI in healthcare is I do think that there may come a time when somebody gets the great idea that for some vulnerable populations, like poor people, AI care is good enough that we can just eliminate the doctors. Then they can just have AI care. It doesn't make that many mistakes. It's good enough for them. I'm afraid of that. And I don't think that's been talked about enough. Yeah,
I think about this all the time with self-driving cars are going to be the way of the future. I don't care if somebody comes up with a study that says that self-driving cars are way more safe than humans driving. I'm not giving up the steering wheel. In my lifetime, I just cannot see me giving up the steering wheel. I want to be in control of the moving the moving object that I am in. I don't even like pilots. Every time there's a bump in the sky, I'm like, yep, I'll take over. I got it. Let me up there. I am Noah Wiley when it comes to believing I can fly a plane.
My formerly thrill-seeking son has now become very risk-averse for no particular reason, and he's got to say now where he's like, yep, flat land is amazing. It's like, I like being on land, not on water. I like being in land, not in the sky. He's like, flat lands with just a gentle curve, that's where it's at.
That's so interesting, because, man, he was just fearless for a long time. That kid was... in his teens, he was doing those like extreme, downhill races. And I was like, God, you are a maniac.
Well, you fracture enough femurs, Jeff, and you're like, flat land is where it's
great.
at.
Yeah, that's funny. All right, Josh, let's talk a little bit about the show. Because one of the tough things for me about season 2 was the promise of this premise is that we are going to get really tight plots. Because this is a show that's taking place in real time, so everything is going to be tight and buttoned up and bulletproof. And season 1 was that. But there were some really lazy kind of writing moments in this that drove me nuts. One of them, I'll give you an example, and then you can go. They tell somebody that they need to have a conversation with them. And then in the very next scene, they've had the conversation. So there was a time jump. And it's like, that can't happen in a show where you've promised me a real-time adventure. And so it's just things like that drove me nuts. But you had an issue with the July 4th-iness.
Oh my God, Jeff! I think you definitely know, and I think our listeners are getting to know by now. I am a really difficult person to please when it comes to details.
Sure.
There are things that I will just flat overlook because it's a good science fiction show, and
Sure.
then I will kill you because you didn't follow your own rules in universe.
Yeah, that's important.
What just bugged the shit out of me in season 2, and I just couldn't get past it, was what a big deal they made about it being July 4th.
Right.
And then had all these non-July 4th things happen. For instance, they had this kid who came in dehydrated because he was at football practice out in the heat. Okay, football season hasn't started yet for the youths, and they're not practicing on July 4th.
Right.
That was just stupid.
Unnecessary.
And then the other thing, and this was a plot point that, again, they didn't really do a whole lot with, is that the Dr. Mel character, fabulous character, was stressed all season/day because she had to do a deposition. No one's doing a deposition on July 4th. No hospital lawyer, no no plaintiff's lawyer. They are not working on July 4th. She's not doing a deposition on that. Drove me knucking futs.
Yeah, and just the July 4th-iness is like, after the first season, you're like, okay, they did a mass shooting. That was interesting. How does a hospital like the Pitt that's overwhelmed, that's already overwhelmed, how do they deal with a mass shooting? So then the news comes out that they're going to have it on July 4th. I'm like, oh, great, fireworks. There's going to be some sort of massive fire. That's obviously what this is going to be about. And then they did very little with fireworks. There was a water park, but there were only two people that came from the water park. And then the massive event of this season was the cyber attack, which all that happened with the cyber attack is, man, we got to do a lot more paperwork. There was very little care that was interrupted. It was just like, oh, man, can you believe this mountain of paperwork? I'm like, wow, that is high drama. That was high drama, guys. Well done.
Okay. Now,
and I was just like, what? What are we doing here?
while I agree with you, I absolutely agree with you from a show watcher's perspective. I will also say that it is absolutely more catastrophic from a medical professional to have your EHR go down and have to go back to paperwork than the mass shooting from the first season. It is far more disruptive.
Sure. But, but they really went into detail about how they were going to solve that. I was like, I don't care. I don't care. There was some doctor somewhere being like, no, trust me, this is dramatic. And it's like, no.
Oh, that is 100% what happened. Just like, no, you guys don't get it.
You guys don't even know.
No, you don't
this
even know.
Shit is gold.
We did have an incident a few years ago at a hospital I worked at where all our computer systems went down and we had to go back to writing things on paper for a couple days, actually. And one of the biggest problems we had was that the older doctors were writing cursive and the younger nurses had no idea how to read cursive.
Wow.
Yeah,
Josh,
yeah.
There should be an entire show about it.
No, Jeff, you don't even know. This is gold.
Wow. Cursive and non-cursive. I mean, whew. Man, if I just saw that as a show heading, I'd be like, yeah, let's watch the cursive episode.
Next episode on The Fork.
There you go. All right, Josh, let me get a little screenwritery here for you. Because this was one of my big issues with season 2. And I hate to shit on shows, but it's like I really only shit on shows that I love. And I do love The Pitt. But I want to talk about the importance of payoff. Because one of the things that this season did not do was pay off any of the storylines. This needed a last episode because they were very close to paying them off, but very few of them paid off. And I'm going to give you an example of why it's so important, because I can already hear some keyboard warriors be like, no, these things are ongoing, and it shows how, these problems are going to persist, blah, blah, blah. Yes, but not in screenwriting. When you introduce something in screenwriting, you got to pay it off. And there's a very famous story that Vince Gilligan tells about Breaking Bad. And in a very early season, Walter buys this massive gun. And they're constantly in the writer's room trying to figure out, how do we pay off that gun? How do we pay off that gun that he bought? How do we pay it off? And I think by the last season, most of the audience members had forgotten about it, except for your diehard fans. And in the last episode, they pay off the gun, and he uses that gun to save Jesse, and and they finally pay it off. But you have to pay off the things that you introduce. You have to do it in order to be great television. Otherwise, what are we doing? Why introduce it if we're not going to pay it off? And almost every single one of the characters this season, they didn't pay off their storyline. We talked about the AI with Alashimi. Let's also talk about whether Alashimi is going to lose her job. Right. We didn't deal with that at all. Melissa's deposition, we don't pay that off. She's got to go back. We didn't even get to see it. We just see that she's really stressed out about it. Is she going to be sued for malpractice because of this? We have no idea. Please pay that one off for me. Is Nurse Dana going to get fired? And what's up with her needing to have that drug in her pocket in order to protect herself? That never got dealt with. We know that Mohan is gone. They spend a bunch of time with Mohan and whether or not, what she's going to practice next year. And the only reason we know she's not coming back is because it's been talked about in Variety about the actor.
Right.
So, that didn't get paid off. Did we forget that Nurse Jessie was taken by ICE?
I did until you mentioned it.
There you go. And is Robby actually going to be leaving? What are they going to do with the baby that he was holding in the end?
Yeah.
There wasn't a single storyline that they paid off in any satisfying way. This needed one more episode. And given the fact that the show does time jumps, none of these things are going to get paid off, or they're going to be paid off screen.
Yeah.
With the exception of Langdon's storyline. And this is an example of a good payoff. Langdon in the first season was dealing with a drug addiction. Robby sends him out. says, you better get some help for this. It's Langdon's first day back. He obviously, there's going to be some rust on him. He's got to deal with his relationship with Robby. He's got to deal with whether he feels he's a good doctor anymore. In the end, Robby tells him, doctor the fuck up, and he does something super impressive, and he realizes, I still do have it. And Robby's the one who needs help, not me. And he has an amazing monologue at the end where he tells Robby off and is like, no, I belong here. I'm supposed to be here. You're the one who now needs help, but at least I was able to confront my demons. It was a great beginning to end storyline. But he was the only one. And you have to pay those things off. You have to. Otherwise, you leave your audience, myself, very unsatisfied.
Completely agree. It was really well said. The only counterpoint I will make is that I am really interested to see how these things pay off in season 3.
They're all going to pay off camera. Unless we start with the very next shift.
No, I know, and I don't know how I feel about that. I'm curious to see how they're going to deal with it.
Yeah,
I'm curious to see if they're going to just leave some of these things unpaid off,
and they're going to have to. I can't remember her name, but the doctor who, was doing all the TikToks. All of a sudden, at the end, it's like, man, I don't know if I want to do this. Well, you should be a psychiatrist. Great idea.
Yeah, that was a.
Is she going to now be a psychiatrist? Like,
I will say, that kind of epiphany moment like that happens for more doctors than you think. As you're getting
psychiatrist, Dr. Josh Jones. Did that happen for you?
Yeah, it did. I wasn't actually thinking about psychiatry very seriously until it came down to applying for the match. And I was like, oh, what do I really want to do? And it's like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. So that happens to people. That is not unusual.
And I'm sure it isn't, but factually isn't as interesting as a good story. And you could have had a storyline where
You're wrong, Jeff. This is gold. This is perfect. This is gold.
You could have had a storyline where that doctor helps somebody through a mental health crisis and then realizes, like, hey, I really enjoyed that.
Right.
But it's like, hey, you do those TikToks and you talk about a lot about mental health during your TikToks, which we didn't see.
Yeah.
And then now maybe you should go into psychiatry. Well, I should go into psychiatry. That was a terrible impersonation of her, and obviously she sounds nothing like that. Okay, but Josh, so with all of that, Josh, I am excited for season 3. And I've also been thinking about, like, who do I want to see in season 3? And so this week's top 5 is I made a list of actors that I think would be appropriate for the Pitt and their storylines. And so it's my top 5 actors and storylines that I would like to see either join the cast or have a nice little guest star run for season 3 of the Pitt. Okay.
Oh, I'm excited. All right, Jeff. Yeah. Well, do you have any honorable mentions?
No honorable mentions, just a straight up top 5.
Yeah, well, it's that important. Let's jump into it. Who is your number 5?
Okay, so number 5, we're going to go with Mahershala Ali. He was in House of Cards. He's an incredible actor. He does really well on TV. He's not afraid to take a difficult role. I want to see him as a quietly brilliant palliative care doctor who challenged Robby's obsession with saving lives by forcing him to confront when letting go is the more humane choice. They did that a little in season 2 with the mom who, was just tired of being so sick. But I want to see Robby go toe to toe with Mahershala Ali on this one.
Interesting. That'd be a great casting choice. Okay, number 4.
Number 4, give me Caitlin Dever. Movie star, also incredible on television. Let's see her as a recurring ER patient with mysterious, ever-shifting symptoms. As she becomes the center of a hospital-wide investigation, and as Robby slowly uncovers that she's actually inducing her own illnesses, culminating in a devastating reveal that her need for care is tied to deeply buried trauma that the hospital may have caused.
Oh, whoa. Man, right? I hope that they're taking notes on this.
These are freebies. These are freebies for you writers of the Pit.
All right, Jeff. Number 3.
Number 3, give me Giancarlo Esposito, who is just always a win. But let's see some more administration plot lines. I loved season 1 when he was battling with the administrator. So in season 3, Giancarlo is going to launch a sweeping efficiency overhaul, cutting staff, limiting procedures, implementing strict triage algorithms, which initially improves outcomes on paper, but ultimately leads to a catastrophic, preventable death that ignites an all-out war with Robby.
Oof. Whoa. Amazing. Okay.
Are you feeling
2.
these as a doctor? You like these?
I'm loving it, except for the fact that the administrator wouldn't limit procedures. You can charge a lot more for those. But other than that, Jeff, what's your number 2?
I know you're not a huge fan of this actor. I think he's incredible, but I want to see John Bernthal.
I love John Bernthal.
I want to see him.
Don't do me dirty like that. I love John Bernthal.
There's somebody I know doesn't like John Bernthal. Maybe it's my wife.
Well, it's not me.
Let's see him as a decorated paramedic with a reputation for impossible saves. He's become a local legend until Robby starts noticing a pattern in his cases, leading to the discovery that he's taking escalating risks to sort of manufacture heroics, pushing both men towards a breaking point when a rescue goes horribly wrong. This is a little bit inspired by Sean Hattasey's character, where, during the day he's like getting shot at. But I want to see a whole character around that. I think John Bernthal would be perfect for it.
Sure. If the Punisher became a paramedic, this is this is what would happen. So
there you go.
Okay, Jeff, and your number 1 actor and storyline that you would like to see in season 3 of The Pitt.
Number 1, give me Sterling K. Brown, baby. I love Sterling. I actually knew Sterling before he became super big. He was a voiceover client at one of the agencies I worked at. Just an incredibly nice guy. God, he was nice. But I want to see him as a high-profile patient and former malpractice attorney who's admitted after a traumatic accident and begins quietly observing the ER and eventually builds a case against the hospital from his hospital bed, forcing Robby into a tense psychological chess match where every decision could become evidence.
All day Sterling K. I listened to another podcast where one of the podcast hosts also knew Sterling K. Brown before he became mega famous, and she describes him as always having been unnecessarily ripped.
Oh yeah. Just totally ripped. And good for him. I mean, I can't. My gym is right over there, and I can't even get to it.
Jeff, that was a fabulous list. Any one of those would make season 3. I mean, season 3 is going to be must watch anyways, but any one of those would make season 3 amazing.
Yeah, and at this point, they can do some serious stunt casting and sort of get whoever they want for these roles. So I would like to see it. Oh, also, Josh, this is something super interesting just about like the tiny sort of insular nature of Hollywood.
Sure.
One of my friends was in one of the latter episodes of The Pitt, and she shows up as the cop who collects the rape kits.
Yeah.
And I immediately was like, October, you're in The Pitt. And she was like, yeah, I did a couple episodes. And I just was so delightful to see because I think she's such an amazing actor. But it's a blink and you miss her kind of role. And what I love about this town is that, like, that person who was essentially kind of looked like an extra in this, you wouldn't know it, but she was the voice of Ford trucks for years. And so, just this kind of cop that's like walking through your scene, you have heard her voice maybe every 15 minutes. If you've ever watched a sporting event, you have heard her voice. And I just love that, like, sort of tiny nature of Hollywood where so many people are doing so many things. And October is just one of my favorite clients that I've ever had. She's just a lovely human being, and that was one of her first like really big jobs, and so it was just delightful to see her stroll across my TV for a second.
That's great. That's awesome. Well, congratulations to you, October.
All right, Josh. Any last thoughts for us? We talked about some pretty serious stuff, so I do, remind us of what good mental health looks like for our friends who might be experiencing some depression.
Yeah, Jeff, the biggest thing I think that you want to take from our episode and coverage of the Pit is that there are people out there that are suffering. There are people out there suffering that you know, and that checking in with them, finding out how they're doing, and especially paying attention to behavioral changes that make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, that tell you, hey, I should ask how this person's doing, is vitally important. And, as always, do not forget about the 988 crisis response number that you can call or text, and trained clinicians are on the other end of that line. You don't have to be you do not have to be in that most serious crisis state. You can be in that passive ideation state and call, and it's okay.
Yeah, and that there are so many states and there's so many, different, not even levels like 1, 2, 3, but there's so many just shades. There's shades that are sort of mixing in one's brain when it comes to these things.
That's a good word, Jeff. Shades of this.
Yeah.
That's really well said.
Yeah, I will always remember the Leo McGarry quote from The West Wing. When Josh is dealing with PTSD, and he's tells the story of a man stuck in a hole. Doctor comes by, writes him a prescription. Priest comes by, throws down a prayer, and then a friend comes by, jumps in the hole. And he's like, "What are you doing?" "No, we're both in the hole." He's like, "Yeah, but I know the way out." Like you and I have both been through some mental health issues, and I do know the way out, and I have helped some people when I'm like, yeah. And I had a friend where I just stepped in and said, like, "Hey, we're calling a psychiatrist today." And he was over the moon. He was like, yeah, let's do it. That's probably a good idea. And it was like, and got some help. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I am that kind of person. My friends, it's well established that I am that kind of pushy person. That might not be for everybody, but, it's definitely a part of the Jeff Jones experience. But be that person for people. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. All right. Thanks as always for watching or listening to Cinemental and our coverage of The Pit Season 2. Cinemental is produced by me, Jeff Jones, and edited by David Haverty. If you like this episode, please subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. You can also watch clips of Cinemental on YouTube, where we would love to hear what you would like us to cover next. You can also watch my companion series, The One Thing, where I take a deeper dive into screenwriting, both available on the Large and in Charge channel on YouTube. You can find Dr. Jones on Ask Jeeves or by following him on Google+. This has been a Large and in Charge production in association with PMC Media. For Dr. Josh Jones, I am Jeff Jones, and we will see you next week.
I want you to hit me as hard as you can.